5 seconds of contact. That was the price of a $20 million budget. Demetra Douglas pressed her lips to Han Tae-won's mouth and tasted something she couldn't name. Not alcohol, not fear. Something sharper, like standing too close to a transformer before it blows. The chandeliers overhead seemed to dim, or maybe that was just the oxygen leaving her lungs, because when she pulled back, the ballroom at the Lotte Hotel wasn't celebrating anymore. It was staring. She expected embarrassment, maybe. A polite smile from a wealthy donor who'd just been ambushed by corporate desperation. What she got instead was a look so direct it felt invasive. Dark eyes that didn't blink, didn't soften, didn't release her from whatever assessment was happening behind them. Han Tae-won wasn't handsome in the way Seoul magazines defined it. He was constructed like a weapon someone had tried to dress in civilian clothes. Sharp angles and controlled force. The kind of man who made rooms feel inadequate just by occupying them. His suit was black, fitted with such precision it looked architectural rather than fashionable. Ink crawled up the left side of his neck in geometric patterns that disappeared beneath his collar, deliberate as circuit boards. But it was his hands that stopped her breathing. They rested on the white tablecloth like evidence at a crime scene. The right knuckles were split, blood still fresh enough to gleam under the crystal light fixtures, dark red against his skin, recent enough that it hadn't started to dry. Someone else's blood. "You taste desperate," he said, his voice textured like gravel wrapped in silk. Not loud. The low frequency traveled through her sternum. Demetra's throat felt lined with sand. She became aware of how close they still were, how his exhale moved the air between them, how a small device was tucked into his left ear, a pinprick of blue light blinking in steady rhythm. "It was a business transaction," she said, hating how thin her voice sounded. "Business." He repeated it like he was testing the weight distribution. Then his hand moved, not quickly, but with the certainty of a lock engaging. His fingers encircled her wrist, not crushing, not even tight, just absolute, like being held by architecture. "You just authenticated yourself into a system you don't understand." Demetra tried to pull away. His grip was immovable. Not painful, just factual. The way gravity is factual. Director O needed a photo with his largest donor. I needed project approval. Transaction complete. "Director O," Tae-won said slowly, "sold you 3 days ago. I'm just the one who collected." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. He released her wrist and placed that same hand on the table beside her hip, close enough that heat radiated through the fabric of her gold and black suit. The blood on his knuckles was already darkening, oxidizing in real time. "Biometric sync confirmed," a voice said through his earpiece, barely audible but clear enough for her to hear. "Dual authentication protocol is now active." Demetra's mind, trained on systems and security, began running calculations. Dual authentication meant 2 separate verification sources. Fingerprint and retina. Password and physical token. Kiss and her facial geometry, the angle of contact, the duration, the proximity sensors. She hadn't just kissed a stranger. She'd been scanned. Welcome to Ruthless Romance Tales. And honey, you just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do safe here, we do dangerous. We do addictive. We do the kind of love that brands your soul and refuses to let go. And if you're new, buckle the hell up. Because what you're about to witness is a collision so violent, so inevitable, it'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about romance. Hit that like button like your life depends on it. Subscribe because you're already hooked. And smash that notification bell. Because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now let's watch how this Mafia boss's life changes forever. "You should leave Seoul," Tae-won said, his voice carrying something that wasn't quite concern. "And what have I become? The second lock on 60 billion won in cryptocurrency. The only biometric authorization standing between the Russian Kozlov family and complete control of my syndicate's offshore assets." He stepped back, giving her space she no longer wanted. "Congratulations, Miss Douglas. You're now the most valuable target in South Korea." Demetra turned and walked toward the wall of windows overlooking the Han River, forcing her legs into the same confident stride she'd carried into this gala. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, a Detroit girl wearing ambition like body armor because anything softer would have gotten her killed in her father's world. Sharp-shouldered jacket, gold threading against black, hair pulled tight enough to ache. She looked like she belonged here. That had been the entire point. Behind her, she heard Tae-won speaking Korean into his earpiece, his tone unchanged, unbothered. "Run facial recognition. Full background. I want to know everything about Demetra Douglas in the next 30 minutes. And send a surveillance team to her apartment. The Russians will move tonight. Dimitra pressed her palm against the cold glass and stared at Seoul's glittering sprawl. 2 years ago, she'd come to this city to build something clean, infrastructure that protected people instead of controlling them. The Aegis grid, her design, her vision, her proof that security could serve communities instead of governments. Now she understood. There was no such thing as clean infrastructure, just people who washed the blood off faster than others. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, she answered without turning around. Miss Douglas, a voice said, accented and cold. Russian. My name is Dmitry Kozlov. Director O was kind enough to provide me with your contact information along with your biometric profile. I'm calling to explain what happens next. Dimitra's hand tightened on her phone. I'm listening. In approximately 4 hours, a team will arrive at your apartment in Itaewon. They will extract you to a secondary location where you will provide facial authentication to unlock certain financial assets. After which, you will be disposed of in a manner that preserves your biometric integrity for approximately 45 minutes. We've tested this timeline extensively. You're telling me you're going to kill me and use my corpse as a password. Precisely. I appreciate your directness. It makes this conversation much more efficient. She heard him smile through the phone. You have one alternative. Unlock the assets voluntarily, and we'll kill you quickly, painlessly, almost a mercy, given the circumstances. The line went dead. Dimitra stood at the window, her reflection superimposed over the city she'd tried to protect, and felt the weight of every decision that had led her to this moment. Her father's death in Detroit, her mother's illness draining her scholarships, the job offer from Seoul's infrastructure ministry that had seemed like salvation, Director O's casual suggestion 2 weeks ago. If you want the Aegis grid funded, you'll need to make certain sacrifices. She thought he meant her time, her pride, maybe her ethics. She hadn't realized he meant her life. Behind her, footsteps approached. She knew without looking it was Taewon. The Russians just called you, he said. Not a question. How did you know? Because they called me 5 minutes before that, threatening to kill everyone in my organization unless I surrender the first authentication key. He moved to stand beside her at the window. They're not subtle people. Are you going to surrender? No. He looked at her reflection in the glass. Are you going to run? Dimitra thought about her father, about the way he'd taught her to assess situations before reacting, about the precinct training that had taught her more about survival than any university course. Running is how you lose, she said. Smart. Taewon pulled out his phone. Then we have approximately 3 hours and 47 minutes to turn you from a target into a weapon. My car is waiting. You can stay here and die for a paycheck. Or you can come with me and live long enough to make different choices. Dimitra looked one last time at her reflection. At the woman who'd come to Seoul believing in clean hands and noble infrastructure. That woman was gone. Let's go, she said. The car was idling in the underground garage. Engine running, no license plate. Dimitra slid into the back seat beside Taewon, and the door closed with a pneumatic hiss that made the world outside feel suddenly distant. The interior smelled like leather and something antiseptic. The driver didn't turn around, didn't speak, just pulled smoothly into the empty Seoul streets, with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd executed this exact extraction dozens of times. Where are we going? Dimitra asked, her laptop bag pressed against her chest like a shield. Namsan, safe house. Taewon was typing on a tablet, his fingers moving with the same controlled precision as everything else about him. We have 3 hours and 38 minutes before the Kozlovs breach your apartment. I need you functional and informed before then. Informed about what? He turned the tablet toward her. The screen showed a 3-dimensional rendering of what looked like a distributed server network, nodes pulsing in different colors across a map of Seoul and beyond. This is the White Tiger Syndicate's financial infrastructure. 60 billion won in cryptocurrency, distributed across 47 shell companies in 12 countries. It's protected by a dual authentication protocol I designed 5 years ago, when I inherited the organization from my father. Dimitra studied the architecture. It was elegant, paranoid, and clearly built by someone who understood not just encryption but human psychology. Fingerprint and facial recognition. Correct. My fingerprint is the first lock. The second lock was supposed to be my second-in-command, Jihoon. He's been with the syndicate since before my father died. I trusted him completely. Taewon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 3 months ago, I discovered he was selling our server locations to the Kozlov family. Not for money. For a promise. What kind of promise? Leadership. The Kozlovs told him they'd eliminate me and install him as head of the Seoul territory once they'd secured the financial assets. Taewon zoomed in on a series of transaction records. He's been systematically mapping our entire infrastructure. Safe houses, accountants, shipment routes, everything they'd need to dismantle the syndicate piece by piece. So you removed him from the authentication protocol? I couldn't. Not without him knowing I'd discovered his betrayal. If he realized I was aware, he'd accelerate the Kozlov's timeline. So instead, I did something else. Taewon pulled up a different screen. Security footage from the gala, time-stamped 2 hours ago. I replaced him. The footage showed Director Oh approaching Taewon earlier in the evening, before Dimitra had arrived. They were speaking, but there was no audio. Director Oh was sweating, gesturing frantically. Taewon was motionless. I listening. Director Oh came to me 6 days ago, Taewon said. He owed the Triads 300 million won from a gambling debt he'd hidden from the ministry. He was desperate. I offered him a solution. I would pay his debt in exchange for one thing. Dimitra's stomach dropped. My biometric data. Not just your data, you. Physically. In proximity to my authentication sensors. He closed the footage. Director O told me about you 3 months ago when he was trying to secure funding for the Aegis Grid. Brilliant Detroit-born cybersecurity architect. Full scholarship to MIT. Turned down positions with the NSA, CIA, and Homeland Security because you didn't want to build weapons. You came to Seoul to design civilian infrastructure that protected communities. You've been planning this for 3 months. I've been preparing for scenarios since I learned Ji-hoon betrayed me. You were the optimal solution. Someone with no connection to the syndicate. Someone with expertise I'd eventually need. Someone Director O could manipulate into position without suspecting the actual transaction. Taewon met her eyes directly. I didn't expect him to sell you to the Kozlov simultaneously. That was his own initiative. Trying to profit from both sides. The car climbed into the hills, Seoul's lights spreading below them like circuitry. Dimitra's mind was running probability calculations, analyzing variables, looking for exits that didn't exist. So I'm not just a replacement lock, she said. I'm bait. You were bait. Now you're leverage. He pulled up a new file. The Kozlovs don't know you've already been integrated into my system. They think you're just a ministry employee with administrative access to the Aegis Grid. They want you for 2 reasons. 1. Your facial biometrics can potentially unlock my ledger if they can force the authentication. 2. Your access to Seoul's security infrastructure gives them visibility into police movements, surveillance networks, and emergency response systems. They want to use me to rob you and blind the city simultaneously. Correct. Which means you're valuable alive until they have what they need. Then you become a liability. The car pulled up to what looked like a maintenance shed on the mountainside. But as they approached, Dimitra saw the subtle shimmer of smart glass technology. One-way film, military grade. They stepped out into cold mountain air. Taewon pressed his palm against a scanner hidden in the shed's doorframe, and the entire wall retracted, revealing the actual structure beyond. A glass box cantilevered over the city, minimal and modern and completely isolated. Welcome to the only place in Seoul the Kozlovs can't currently track, Taewon said, gesturing her inside. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. White surfaces, chrome fixtures, a server rack in the corner humming with blue LED light, floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides showing Seoul's sprawl below. It's too exposed, Dimitra said immediately. The glass is one-way smart film with thermal masking. From outside, this looks like a maintenance shed with a heat signature matching empty storage. From inside, we have complete visibility. Taewon moved to the server rack and began typing. We have 3 hours and 12 minutes before the Kozlovs reach your apartment. I need you to do 2 things in that time. Which are, first, use your Aegis Grid access to track Ji-hoon's movements over the past 72 hours. He's been meeting with Kozlov operatives, but I don't know where or when. Your infrastructure logs everything. Traffic cameras, credit card transactions, cell tower pings, find the pattern. Dimitra set her laptop on the low couch and opened it. And second, build me a trap. Taewon pulled up the ledger architecture. You're a cybersecurity expert. I need you to create something that looks like a vulnerability but functions as a weapon. If the Kozlovs force us to unlock this ledger, I want them to inherit a poison pill, not a prize. Dimitra stared at the code structure, her mind already dissecting it, finding the pressure points, identifying where she could embed something lethal. A logic bomb. Exactly. Taewon sat across from her. Can you do it? She pulled out the USB drive he'd given her in the car, the one containing shadow administrative access to the Aegis grid. The access he'd had built into her own system 18 months ago without her knowledge. "You compromised my infrastructure before it was even operational," she said. "I compromised every infrastructure in Seoul worth compromising. It's not personal. It's pattern recognition." He leaned back. "Can you do it?" Dimitra looked at him. This man who'd orchestrated her kidnapping, her authentication, her conversion from architect to asset. This man with blood on his knuckles and ice in his voice. This man who just handed her administrative access to his entire financial empire and asked her to weaponize it. "Yes," she said. "I can do it. Then we have 2 hours and 53 minutes before the Russians come for you. Let's make them count." Dimitra plugged in the shadow admin drive and watched her screen populate with access to every camera, every sensor, every node in Seoul's security network. The city she'd built to protect people. Now she'd use it to hunt a traitor and trap an army. Her fingers began to move across the keyboard, and for the first time since the kiss, she felt something other than fear. She felt dangerous. The data painted Jihoon's betrayal in timestamps and coordinates. Dimitra pulled 72 hours of surveillance footage, cross-referencing credit card transactions with traffic camera logs and cell tower pings. The Aegis grid had been watching Jihoon without knowing it, documenting every movement with the indifferent precision of good code. "Thursday, 11:47 p.m., she said, pulling up footage. Bukchon Hanok Village, traditional tea house called Moon's Daughter. The screen showed Jihoon entering alone, exiting 47 minutes later. The timestamp matched a wire transfer from a Cypriot shell company to an account registered under a false name that still pinged back to Jihoon's actual passport number through 3 layers of proxy. "He met someone inside," Taewon said, leaning forward. "The tea house has no internal cameras, but the Aegis grid tracks all foot traffic within a 2-block radius using gate recognition software." Dimitra pulled up a secondary algorithm she'd designed for crowd analysis. One other person entered during Jihoon's visit and left 3 minutes after him. Male, approximately 185 centimeters, distinctive limp favoring the left leg. She ran the gate signature through immigration records. "Dmitry Kozlov," Taewon said before the name even appeared on screen. "He broke his femur 2 years ago during a smuggling operation in Vladivostok. Never healed properly." Dimitra pulled up more footage. "They've met 4 times in the past month. Always the same tea house. Always exactly 47 minutes. The last meeting was yesterday at 6:15 p.m., 6 hours before the gala. Show me yesterday's meeting." She pulled the footage. Jihoon entering. Dmitry arriving 12 minutes later. Both men leaving separately. Jihoon first, then Dmitry. But this time, there was a third person. A woman, early 30s, entering the tea house 5 minutes before Dmitry left. Dimitra froze the frame and enhanced it. The woman's face became clear. Professional, cold, European features. "Katya Kozlov," Taewon said, his voice dropping to something darker. "Dmitry's sister. She runs their Seoul operations while he handles Moscow. If she's here, this isn't reconnaissance anymore. This is execution phase. There's more." Dimitra pulled up financial records. After yesterday's meeting, Jihoon accessed the ministry's central database using Director O's stolen credentials. He downloaded the complete Aegis grid architecture, including security protocols, administrative access points, and my personal biometric profile. Taewon went very still. "He gave them everything they needed to track you. Not just track, replace." Dimitra pulled up the downloaded files. "My facial geometry, retinal patterns, even my gate signature. If they wanted, they could build a deep-fake authentication system using this data. They wouldn't need me alive. They'd just need me rendered." Rendered? 3D printed facial prosthetics mapped to my exact bone structure. It's bleeding edge, but the technology exists. The Mossad used it in 2023 to bypass a Tehran security checkpoint. If the Kozlovs have access to that level of fabrication, they could theoretically authenticate as me without my cooperation. Taewon stood and moved to the window, his silhouette sharp against Seoul's glow. How long would fabrication take? 72 hours minimum. Longer if they want accuracy good enough to fool military-grade biometric scanners. Then we have 3 days before I become obsolete. He turned back to her. "What about the logic bomb? Can you build it in time?" Dimitra pulled up the ledger architecture and began writing code. "I'm embedding a distributed tracking protocol disguised as a standard encryption layer. When someone attempts to access the ledger, the system will appear to unlock normally. But every transaction they make will be tagged with a digital signature that reports to Interpol's financial crimes database in real time. They steal the money and immediately alert every law enforcement agency in the world." "Exactly. The cryptocurrency becomes radioactive, untouchable. Every account holder exposed, every shell company flagged. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. But there's a problem, which is, I need to test it. And testing means accessing your actual ledger with live authentication. She looked up at him. Your fingerprint and my facial scan. If the protocol doesn't work, we could accidentally lock ourselves out permanently. Taewon walked to where she sat and extended his hand. Then let's make sure it works. Dimitra stood, her laptop balanced in one arm. The server rack had a biometric terminal built into its interface. She positioned herself in front of the scanner, feeling the blue light map her face with invisible precision. Facial recognition confirmed, the system announced in Korean. Awaiting secondary authentication, Taewon pressed his thumb to the reader beside her. Dual authentication accepted. Access granted. The screen filled with data. 60 billion won distributed across continents. Transaction histories. Account structures. Everything the Kozlovs wanted, now exposed in front of them. Dimitra's heart hammered, but her hand stayed steady. She opened the root directory and began embedding her code, weaving the tracking protocol into the existing architecture like a virus hiding in healthy tissue. 15 minutes later, she stepped back. Done. The trap is armed. Taewon studied the code. It's invisible. That's the point. They'll think they've won until every transaction they make becomes a confession. She closed the terminal. But we have another problem. Director O knows I have Aegis access. If he tells the Kozlovs I can track their movements through the city's infrastructure, they'll realize I'm more dangerous than valuable. Director O won't tell them anything. Taewon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. He's dead. Dimitra felt her blood turn cold. How? Katya Kozlov, 30 minutes ago. Single gunshot, close range, in his ministry office. Taewon showed her the message from someone named Yuna. The Kozlovs are cleaning up loose ends. Director O served his purpose. Now he's a liability, which means I'm next. No. Taewon pocketed his phone. You're not a loose end. You're the objective. They need you alive until they fabricate your biometrics or force you to unlock the ledger. We have 3 days to make sure neither happens. How? By doing what they won't expect. He moved to the server rack and pulled up a schematic. The Aegis Tower. We're going to break into your own building, access the core server, and replace your biometric profile with encrypted data only you can decode. If they try to fabricate you, the authentication will fail. If they try to force you, the system will recognize the coercion and lock permanently. Dimitra stared at the schematic. You want to turn me into a living encryption key that only works under voluntary conditions. I want to make you impossible to duplicate and dangerous to threaten. He looked at her. Can you code that? She thought about her father, about the precinct training that taught her to always have a backup plan, about the systems she'd built her entire career to protect people who never knew her name. Yes, she said, I can code that. Then we move in 2 hours. Before the Kozlovs realize Director O's death just made you the only person who can give them what they want. Dimitra sat back down and opened her laptop. She had 2 hours to turn herself into a weapon the Kozlovs couldn't duplicate and Taewon couldn't betray. Her fingers found the keyboard, and she began to code her own survival. They left the safe house at 4:32 a.m., when Seoul was still dark and empty. The drive back into the city felt different this time. Dimitra sat in the back seat with her laptop open, finalizing the voluntary authentication protocol, while Taewon coordinated with Yuna through encrypted messages. The code she'd written was elegant and vicious, a biometric lock that would only open if her heartbeat remained within normal resting parameters, and her facial micro-expressions showed no signs of duress. Fear would lock the system permanently. Yuna's already inside Aegis Tower, Taewon said, showing her his phone. She's looped the security footage and disabled the motion sensors on your server floor. We have a 12-minute window before the automated system runs a diagnostic check and notices the tampering. 12 minutes to reach the 37th floor, access the core terminal, and upload new biometric encryption. Dimitra closed her laptop. That's cutting it extremely close. Close is all we ever get. The car pulled into the underground garage, and Taewon's phone buzzed again. He read the message and his jaw tightened. The Kozlovs just mobilized. 6 vehicles heading toward your apartment in Itaewon. They're moving up their extraction timeline. Because Director O is dead and they know I'm the last thread. Exactly. He opened his door. Which means we have less time than I calculated. Move fast. They took the service elevator, the same one maintenance crews used to bypass public security. Taewon swiped a keycard that shouldn't have worked for him, and the doors opened smoothly. Dimitra felt her pulse spike as they climbed, watching the floor numbers illuminate in sequence. 23, 29, 34. How many systems in Seoul do you have unauthorized access to? She asked. All of them. Taewon's tone was matter of fact. I don't leave vulnerabilities uncontrolled. If a system exists, I either own it or I know who does. The elevator slowed at 37. The doors opened onto the server floor, and Demetra's breath caught. She'd designed this space but never seen it operational. Rows of black server racks stretched into shadow, LEDs blinking like stars, cooling systems creating white noise that felt almost alive. Her cathedral, her fortress. A woman stepped out from behind the nearest rack. Early 30s, compact and efficient, with the kind of stillness that suggested military training. She wore black tactical gear and carried a tablet. Yuna, Taewon said by way of introduction. Yuna nodded to Demetra. 10 minutes left. The diagnostic cycle starts early if the building's AI detects unusual power draws, and someone just activated 3 terminals on the 15th floor. Kozlov's? Demetra asked. No. Ministry night staff. But it accelerates our timeline. Yuna handed Taewon a small device that looked like a carbon fiber bracelet. Thermal masking. Wear it. The building's heat sensors are still active. Demetra moved quickly to the central terminal, her fingers already pulling up administrative access. The system recognized her immediately, welcoming her with her own security clearances. She plugged in her laptop and began the upload. Uploading voluntary authentication protocol, she said. This'll take 6 minutes. Taewon positioned himself near the elevator, watching the hallway. Yuna moved to a secondary terminal and began running interference, creating false data packets to confuse any monitoring systems. The upload bar crawled forward. 15%, 23%. 4 vehicles just entered the Aegis Tower garage, Yuna said, not looking up from her screen. Ground floor. They're using a stolen ministry security code. Demetra's hands didn't shake. Kozlov's? Confirmed. Katya Kozlov is leading them. 8 operatives total. Yuna's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm locking the elevator banks. That'll buy us 3 minutes before they override. 47%. 51%. Taewon's phone buzzed. He read the message and moved to Demetra's side. Ji-hoon just entered the building through the east stairwell. He's bypassing elevators entirely. How far? 20th floor. Climbing fast. Taewon pulled something from his jacket. Not a gun. A collapsible baton. He knows this building's architecture. He'll reach us before the Kozlovs do. 68%. 74%. I need 2 more minutes, Demetra said. You have 90 seconds. Yuna abandoned her terminal and moved to the stairwell door, pressing her ear against it. I can hear footsteps, multiple floors below but ascending rapidly. 89%. 93%. The stairwell door's access light turned from green to red. Someone was overriding the lock from the other side. Demetra, Taewon said quietly. 10 seconds. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. 98%. The door opened, and Ji-hoon stepped through. 100%. Upload complete. Demetra yanked her laptop free and spun toward the exit. But Ji-hoon was already moving, crossing the space between them with frightening speed. Not toward Taewon. Toward her. Taewon intercepted him 3 feet from the terminal, the baton extending with a metallic snap. Ji-hoon blocked the strike and pivoted, his hand reaching for something at his waist. Go! Taewon shouted. Yuna grabbed Demetra's arm and pulled her toward a maintenance corridor Demetra had forgotten existed. They ran, Demetra clutching her laptop, Yuna's hand like iron around her wrist. Behind them, she heard the impact of bodies colliding, heard Taewon's controlled breathing, heard Ji-hoon's voice speaking rapid Korean. Then she heard the elevator doors opening on the far side of the server floor. The Kozlovs had arrived. Yuna shoved Demetra into the corridor and sealed the door behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole. There's a vertical shaft 40 feet ahead, Yuna whispered. Service chain. It drops to sublevel 2. Can you climb down in the dark? Demetra thought about Detroit. About her father teaching her to navigate the precinct's maintenance areas during blackout drills. About learning to trust her hands when her eyes were useless. Yes, they moved by touch through the blackness, Demetra's fingers trailing the wall until they found the access panel. Yuna pried it open, and cold air rushed up from below. Taewon? Demetra asked. We'll handle Ji-hoon. He always does. Yuna tested the chain. You first. I'll cover the access point once you're down. Demetra swung into the shaft, her laptop bag across her chest, her hands gripping cold metal. She descended into darkness, hand under hand, controlled and steady. Above her, she heard voices in the corridor. Russian voices, searching. She kept climbing down, away from the light, away from the Kozlovs, away from the server floor where she'd just encrypted her own biometrics into something impossible to steal. Her feet hit solid ground, a concrete tunnel, emergency lighting casting everything in red. Yuna dropped down beside her seconds later. This way. Sub-level parking. We have a vehicle waiting. They ran through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing off concrete. Behind them, Dimitra heard the distant sound of gunfire. She didn't look back. She'd just turned herself into a weapon the Kozlovs couldn't duplicate. Now she had to survive long enough to use it. The vehicle was a black SUV with reinforced plating and windows too dark to see through. Yuna threw open the rear door and pushed Dimitra inside before sliding into the driver's seat. The engine was already running. They peeled out of the sub-level garage with enough force to make Dimitra brace herself against the door. "Where's Taewon?" Dimitra asked, twisting to look back at Aegis Tower receding behind them. Handling the situation. Yuna navigated through empty streets with precision that suggested she'd mapped every route in advance. "He'll meet us at the secondary location once he's confirmed Ji-hoon's status. Status meaning alive or dead. Meaning neutralized." Yuna's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "We have a tail. Gray sedan. 2 cars back. They picked us up leaving the garage." Dimitra turned. The sedan was maintaining distance, not closing in, just tracking. "Kozlovs? Their surveillance team. They're not trying to intercept. They're trying to follow us to wherever we're going." Yuna took a sharp right turn into a narrow alley, then immediately left into an underground parking structure. "Hold tight." The SUV descended 3 levels in darkness, before Yuna killed the lights and engine. They sat in absolute silence, Dimitra's heartbeat loud in her ears. Through the tinted windows, she watched the gray sedan cruise past the garage entrance without slowing. "They lost us," Yuna said, restarting the engine. "But they'll triangulate. We have maybe 8 minutes before they run traffic camera analysis and pick up our trail again. The Aegis grid tracks all vehicular movement in real time," Dimitra said. "If they have someone accessing the system, they do. One of your ministry colleagues, a man named Park Sung-min. He's been feeding them Aegis access for the past 48 hours in exchange for his gambling debts being forgiven." Yuna pulled out of the garage using a different exit. "Taewon identified him yesterday, but left him operational so we could feed false data when necessary." Dimitra's mind raced. If Park has access to the grid, he can track every camera, every intersection, every... Her laptop chimed, an alert she'd programmed herself. She opened it and felt her blood ice over. "Someone just tried to authenticate into the ledger using my facial biometrics," she said, staring at the screen. "The attempt failed because of my voluntary authentication protocol, but they tried, 4 minutes ago." Yuna's jaw tightened. "They already fabricated a deep fake." "That's impossible. You said fabrication takes 72 hours minimum, unless they didn't build it from scratch." Yuna's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression went dark. "Taewon just sent confirmation. The Kozlovs didn't fabricate your biometrics. They extracted them from someone who already had them stored." "Who?" "Director O's personal server. Before Katya killed him, they forced him to surrender all his files. He'd been keeping detailed records of everyone he was manipulating, including full biometric scans he'd stolen from the ministry database. Your facial geometry, retinal patterns, even your voice print, everything needed to build a convincing fake." Dimitra stared at the failed authentication log, but it didn't work. "My voluntary protocol rejected it. This time, but if they refine the deep fake, if they add thermal imaging or micro-expression simulation..." Yuna took another turn, heading toward the river. "They'll keep trying until they break through or until they realize forcing your cooperation is easier than replicating you. Forcing cooperation means keeping me alive. For now." Yuna pulled onto the Banpo Bridge, the Han River flowing black beneath them. "But Taewon's working on a more permanent solution, which is making the ledger worthless." Yuna handed Dimitra her phone, showing a message from Taewon. "If the Kozlovs can't steal the money, they have no reason to keep hunting you. You become irrelevant instead of invaluable." Dimitra read the message. "Initiate protocol burn. Transfer all assets to decentralized wallets with 48-hour time locks. Make the ledger a countdown timer instead of a vault." "He wants to fragment the entire financial structure," Dimitra said slowly. "Distribute it across thousands of micro-wallets that can't be accessed simultaneously. Even with authentication, the Kozlovs would need 2 days of continuous transfers to consolidate the funds. 2 days we'd use to expose them to Interpol." Yuna's phone buzzed again. She read the message and immediately accelerated. Change of plans. Taewon needs us at the safe house immediately. Jihoon's alive. That's bad? Jihoon being alive isn't the problem. Yuna's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The problem is what he told Taewon before disappearing. The Kozlovs aren't just targeting the ledger anymore. They're executing a full territorial takeover. 23 White Tiger Syndicate locations across Seoul, Busan, and Incheon. Simultaneous strikes happening in 40 minutes. Dimitra felt the air leave her lungs. They're destroying the entire organization. They're trying to. But Taewon's been preparing for this scenario since he discovered Jihoon's betrayal. Yuna took the exit toward Namsan at dangerous speed. He's not going to defend the locations. He's going to use them. Use them how? As bait. Yuna's expression was grim. Every syndicate location Jihoon mapped for the Kozlovs has been rigged with surveillance equipment for the past month. Cameras, audio, digital tracking. When the Kozlovs attack, they're not just committing crimes. They're documenting themselves committing crimes. Understanding crystallized in Dimitra's mind. He's turning their invasion into evidence. Exactly. 23 simultaneous raids captured in high definition and transmitted directly to Interpol's Organized Crime Division. The Kozlovs will expose their entire operational structure in one night. Yuna glanced at her. But it only works if someone with technical expertise coordinates the surveillance feeds and ensures the data reaches the right authorities without being intercepted. You need me to run the operation. Taewon needs you to run the operation. You built the Aegis grid. You understand Seoul's digital infrastructure better than anyone. If you can coordinate the surveillance capture and route it through secure channels, the Kozlovs destroy themselves trying to destroy him. Dimitra opened her laptop, already pulling up the grid's architecture. How much time until the attacks begin? 36 minutes. Then we need to move faster. Yuna's phone lit up with an incoming call. She answered on speaker. We have a problem. Taewon's voice filled the car, steady but urgent. Jihoon didn't just give the Kozlovs our locations. He gave them yours. Dimitra's chest tightened. Mine? Your apartment. Your backup office at the ministry. Your favorite coffee shop in Itaewon. Every place you've been in the past 6 months, mapped and prioritized. There was a pause. Katya Kozlov just dispatched a separate team. Not to capture you, to eliminate you. They've decided forcing your cooperation is too risky. They're going to kill you and perfect the deepfake using your corpse. The SUV swerved as Yuna took an emergency exit off the bridge. How long do we have? Yuna asked. The hit team left Aegis Tower 8 minutes ago. They're tracking your vehicle using the Aegis grid. Park Sung-min is feeding them your location in real time. Dimitra's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up the grid's traffic monitoring system. She found their SUV's signature immediately, a highlighted vehicle being tracked by administrative override. Park's override. I can kill his access, she said. Lock him out of the grid permanently. Do it, Taewon said. Then get to the safe house. We're out of time to be subtle. Yuna, use Route Phantom. Understood. Yuna ended the call and floored the accelerator. Dimitra executed the lockout command, watching Park Sung-min's access privileges evaporate from the system. The tracking highlight on their vehicle disappeared, but in the rearview mirror, headlights appeared. 3 vehicles, moving fast, closing distance. They had our position before I killed the feed, Dimitra said. I know. Yuna's voice was calm, controlled. Route Phantom accounts for pursuit. The SUV plunged into a tunnel, and everything went dark except for the headlights behind them, growing closer with every second. The tunnel stretched for 2 kilometers beneath the Han River. Yuna killed the headlights, navigating by memory and the faint emergency strips along the walls. Behind them, the 3 pursuit vehicles maintained their lights, closing the gap to 50 meters, then 40. They're going to box us in, Dimitra said, gripping her laptop. That's the idea. Yuna's voice was unnaturally calm. In 20 seconds, this tunnel splits into 3 branches. North to Gangnam, west to Mapo, east to emergency maintenance access. They'll have to guess which route we take. And if they split up to cover all 3, then we've divided their force. Yuna's hand moved to a switch on the dashboard. Hold on. The tunnel split appeared ahead. 3 dark mouths branching in different directions. Yuna yanked the wheel hard right toward the maintenance access, simultaneously hitting the switch. The SUV's rear deployed a canister that shattered against the tunnel floor, releasing thick white smoke that billowed into an instant wall. The pursuit vehicles disappeared into the cloud. Yuna accelerated into the maintenance tunnel, a narrow passage barely wide enough for 1 vehicle, concrete walls screaming past on both sides. The tunnel sloped upward, climbing towards street level through a route designed for emergency vehicles only. They'll radio ahead, Dimitra said. Position teams at the exit. The exit is inside a construction zone that's been abandoned for 6 months. No surveillance. No witnesses. Yuna took a sharp turn, and the tunnel opened into a cavernous underground space, filled with construction equipment and rebar. We switch vehicles here. A second SUV was waiting, identical to the first. Yuna braked hard, and they were out and moving before Dimitra's mind fully registered the transition. Her laptop, her bag, everything transferred in seconds. The first vehicle? Dimitra asked as Yuna started the new engine. Has a tracker broadcasting false GPS coordinates. By the time the Kozlovs realize it's empty, we'll be at the safe house. Yuna drove up a ramp that emerged into an alley behind a shuttered restaurant. Dawn was breaking, painting Seoul's skyline in shades of gray and amber. Dimitra's laptop chimed again. Another authentication attempt on the ledger. Failed. They're getting desperate, she said. That's the third attempt in 15 minutes. They're refining the deepfake in real time, trying different variables. Can they break through? Not without understanding my voluntary protocol. But if they capture me and use real-time scanning while I'm conscious, Dimitra pulled up the authentication logs. Wait, these attempts aren't coming from Seoul. Yuna glanced over. Location? Moscow. The authentication requests are being routed through Russian IP addresses. Dimitra ran a trace. They're not trying to break in locally. They've sent my biometric data back to their headquarters for analysis. They have specialists working on this remotely, which means Katya's team isn't trying to force your cooperation anymore. They're just trying to kill me before their tech team cracks the protocol. Dimitra looked at Yuna. How far to the safe house? 4 minutes. Dimitra opened a new terminal and began typing. I need to accelerate Taewon's timeline. If the Kozlovs are throwing their full technical resources at breaking my encryption, we can't wait for the simultaneous raids. We need to burn their entire operation now. You can't coordinate 23 surveillance feeds while we're mobile. I don't need to coordinate all 23. I just need to trigger the most damaging one. Dimitra pulled up a file Taewon had shared earlier. The list of syndicate locations Ji-hoon had mapped. She scanned through them, looking for the highest value target. Here, the Kozlov family's primary Seoul operation, an import-export warehouse in Pyeongtaek registered under a shell company. Ji-hoon's notes say the Kozlovs are storing weapons there, military-grade hardware they're planning to use in the territorial takeover. If we expose that location, we give Interpol and Korean authorities a weapons cache tied directly to the Kozlov family. It's not just evidence of organized crime. It's evidence of arms trafficking on Korean soil. Dimitra's fingers flew across the keyboard. I can access the warehouse's security system through the Aegis grid. The building has smart locks tied into Seoul's commercial infrastructure for fire safety compliance. I can unlock the facility remotely and trigger a silent alarm that routes directly to the National Police Agency. You're going to gift wrap a warehouse full of illegal weapons for the police. I'm going to make the Kozlov Seoul operation radioactive. Dimitra executed the command. The warehouse's digital locks disengaged. The silent alarm activated. Police response time to weapons-related alerts is under 4 minutes. The Kozlovs will have to abandon that location or risk their entire family being tied to international arms trafficking. Yuna's phone buzzed. She checked it while navigating a final turn onto the mountain road leading to the safe house. Taewon confirms Ji-hoon just sent an emergency alert to the Kozlov family. Someone tipped them off about the warehouse compromise. Ji-hoon's still communicating with them? He's trying to salvage his position. If the Kozlovs lose their weapons cache, they lose their ability to execute the territorial takeover. Ji-hoon just became useless to them. Yuna pulled up to the safe house as her phone lit up with another message. And Katya just recalled all pursuit teams. They're scrambling to secure the warehouse before police arrive. Dimitra felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. We just forced them to choose between capturing me and protecting their operation. They chose the operation. Which means you just bought yourself time. Yuna parked and killed the engine. But the Moscow tech team is still working on breaking your protocol. How long before they succeed? Dimitra looked at her authentication logs. The attempts were getting more sophisticated. Closer to the correct parameters. 12 hours. Maybe less if they're as good as I think they are. Then we have 12 hours to dismantle the entire Kozlov operation before they dismantle you. They stepped out of the SUV into cold mountain air. The safe house door was already open. Taewon stood in the entrance, his jacket torn, a fresh cut along his jaw, but alive and upright. Ji-hoon? Dimitra asked. Gone. He has a head start and knowledge of every safe house I control. He'll disappear until he finds new buyers for his information. Taewon's eyes moved to her laptop. But we have bigger problems. Katya Kozlov just sent a message to every criminal organization in Seoul. She's offering 5 billion won for your location. Not capture, location. She's outsourcing your assassination to every gang, every hired operator, every desperate criminal in the city. Dimitra's stomach dropped. She's turning me into a citywide manhunt. She's turning you into the most valuable target in South Korea. Taewon stepped aside to let them enter. Which means we can't hide you anymore. We need to make you impossible to kill. How? Taewon pulled up his tablet, showing her a schematic she recognized. Aegis Tower. By doing the one thing the Kozlovs won't expect. We're going back to where this started. We're going to walk into your building, access the main server, and broadcast your voluntary authentication protocol to every news agency, every law enforcement division, and every intelligence service in the world. You want to make my biometric encryption public knowledge. I want to make you useless to kill. If everyone knows your authentication only works under voluntary conditions, if everyone understands that forcing you or fabricating you will permanently lock the system, you stop being a target. You become a liability the Kozlovs can't afford to touch. Dimitra stared at the schematic, her mind racing through the implications. They'll know exactly where I am. Yes, but they won't be able to touch you without destroying their only chance at the ledger. Taewon met her eyes. It's the biggest risk we can take, but it's the only move they won't see coming. Dimitra thought about her father's voice. Sometimes the best defense is making yourself too expensive to attack. When do we move? She asked. 1 hour. Before the Moscow tech team breaks through. Before Katya realizes what we're planning. Taewon's expression was steel. We end this where it started. They arrived at Aegis Tower at 6:47 a.m. During the shift change when security was most distracted. Dimitra walked through the front entrance this time, not the service elevator or hidden maintenance routes. She walked through the main lobby in full view of every camera she'd installed, every sensor she'd calibrated, every security protocol she'd designed. Taewon walked beside her, Yuna 3 steps behind, all of them visible and deliberate. The security guard at the front desk looked up, recognition flashing across his face. Miss Douglas, I didn't know you were... Emergency system diagnostic, Dimitra said, not slowing down. Server floor, priority override. She swiped her ministry credentials, and the turnstile opened. They crossed the lobby toward the main elevators, and Dimitra felt the weight of every camera tracking their movement. Somewhere, the Kozlov family was watching. Somewhere, Park Sung-min was reporting their location despite being locked out of administrative access. Good. She wanted them to know where she was. The elevator climbed in silence. Taewon was watching the floor numbers, his hand resting near his waist where Dimitra now knew he kept a weapon. Yuna was on her phone, coordinating something in rapid Korean. Interpol is standing by, Yuna said quietly. The moment you broadcast the protocol, they'll move on the Kozlov family's European assets simultaneously, coordinated raids across Moscow, Cyprus, and Berlin. And the warehouse in Pyeongtaek? Dimitra asked. Korean National Police secured it 40 minutes ago. They found enough weapons to supply a small military force. Katya's trying to claim the warehouse was compromised by an unknown third party, but the shell company registration leads directly back to Dmitry Kozlov's passport. The elevator reached the 37th floor. The doors opened onto the server room, exactly as Dimitra had left it hours ago. Except now, standing near the central terminal, was a woman Dimitra had never seen in person. Katya Kozlov. She was smaller than Dimitra expected, compact and efficient, wearing a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than Dimitra's yearly salary. Her blonde hair was pulled into a precise bun, and her expression was calm, almost pleasant. 4 armed men flanked her, weapons drawn but lowered. Miss Douglas, Katya said in lightly accented English. I was hoping you'd come back. Saved me the trouble of hunting you across Seoul. Taewon moved slightly in front of Dimitra, but she stepped around him. This was her building, her server room, her move. You're trespassing, Dimitra said. I'm negotiating. Katya gestured to the terminal. You've made yourself very difficult to replicate. My technical team in Moscow is quite impressed. They believe they can break your voluntary protocol in approximately 6 hours. But that's 6 hours I don't have. So I'm here to offer you a simple transaction. I'm not unlocking the ledger. I'm not asking you to. Katya pulled out a tablet, showing Dimitra a live video feed. 3 people bound to chairs in a windowless room. Dimitra recognized 2 of them immediately, engineers from her Aegis team. The third was Sujin, her lead systems analyst. I'm asking you to choose who lives. Unlock the ledger, and I release all 3. Refuse, and I execute them one at a time until you change your mind. Dimitra felt ice spread through her chest. You're bluffing. Kill them and you lose your leverage. Kill one, and I demonstrate commitment. Kill two, and I prove inevitability. By the time I kill the third, you'll unlock anything I want just to stop the pattern. Katya's smile didn't reach her eyes. I've done this 17 times across 9 countries. The psychology is quite reliable, except I've already made your entire operation worthless, Dimitra said. She pulled out her laptop and opened it, showing Katya the screen. The broadcast protocol was ready, one keystroke away from sending Dimitra's voluntary authentication specifications to every major news agency and law enforcement division simultaneously. The moment I press this key, the world knows that forcing me destroys the ledger permanently. You can torture me, kill me, fabricate me, none of it matters. The authentication requires voluntary compliance or it locks forever. Dimitra met Katya's eyes. You stop being a criminal empire and start being an international embarrassment. The family that spent billions trying to steal a ledger they made permanently inaccessible. Katya's expression didn't change, but her hand moved toward something in her jacket. Taewon's weapon cleared his holster faster than Dimitra could track. Don't. The 4 armed men raised their rifles. Yuna moved, positioning herself to Dimitra's left, her own weapon drawn. The server room became a geometry problem. 7 people, 6 guns, 1 unarmed architect holding the key to 60 billion won. You broadcast that protocol, and your engineers die, Katya said calmly. I'll execute them on principle. Because you chose data over human lives. No. Dimitra's finger hovered over the key. I choose to make sure you can't use this tactic ever again. You kill them. You prove you're willing to murder hostages who have no value. Every law enforcement agency in the world will prioritize your family's elimination. You'll go from criminal enterprise to terrorist organization. Interpol will stop negotiating and start eliminating. You're gambling with their lives. I'm ending the game. Dimitra pressed the key. The broadcast protocol executed. Her voluntary authentication specifications transmitted simultaneously to 73 different agencies and media outlets across 14 countries. Alerts started pinging across her screen as recipients confirmed receipt. CNN, BBC, Interpol, FBI, Korean National Intelligence Service, Europol. The information was public now, irreversible. Katya's tablet buzzed. She glanced at it, and for the first time, Dimitra saw something crack in her composure. My brother is calling. Dmitry wants to know why our Moscow operation is being raided by FSB as we speak. Because Interpol coordinated with Russian authorities the moment my broadcast went live, Yuna said. Your family's European assets are being frozen simultaneously. Your Cyprus accounts, your Berlin properties, your Moscow headquarters. All of it locked down in a coordinated international operation. Katya looked at Dimitra with something that might have been respect. You didn't just protect yourself. You burned my entire family's infrastructure. I protected the architecture, Dimitra said. You just happened to be inside it when it caught fire. Katya's hand moved away from her jacket. She made a gesture, and her 4 armed men lowered their weapons. The hostages are being released to Korean authorities as part of my family's cooperation with international law enforcement, Katya said, her tone flat. We're claiming they were being held by rogue elements we're helping to eliminate. It's a thin story, but it's the only move I have left. She stepped toward the elevator, her men following. At the threshold, she turned back. You would have been an excellent addition to our organization, Miss Douglas. Such a waste. I don't build for criminals, Dimitra said. I build systems that expose them. Katya's smile was cold. Then you've made more enemies today than you realize. The elevator doors closed. Taewon lowered his weapon. She's right. You just declared war on every organization that operates the way the Kozlovs do. Good. Dimitra closed her laptop. Let them come. I'll build something that burns them too. Yuna's phone buzzed. She read the message and looked up. The hostages are safe. Korean police intercepted them 2 blocks from here. Katya kept her word. Dimitra felt something release in her chest. And the Kozlovs? Interpol has issued international arrest warrants. The family's being dismantled as we speak. Yuna pocketed her phone. You just ended a criminal dynasty that's operated for 40 years. No, Dimitra said, looking at Taewon. We ended it, by making the prize worthless and the cost too high. Taewon met her eyes, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Acknowledgement. The ledger is still locked behind our authentication, he said. 60 billion won that neither the Kozlovs nor anyone else can access. What do you want to do with it? Dimitra asked. Taewon was quiet for a long moment, looking at the server room, at the infrastructure they'd used to dismantle an empire. Build something different, he said finally. Something that doesn't require blood to maintain. Dimitra thought about her father, about clean hands and dirty systems, about the choice between building for people who deserved it and building for herself. Then let's build it together, she said. 3 weeks later, Dimitra sat in a cafe in Samcheong-dong that didn't serve coffee, only tea. The place was deliberate in its simplicity. Low wooden tables, paper screens filtering autumn light, the smell of jasmine and bergamot. She'd chosen it because it had no security cameras, no digital payment systems, and an owner who valued privacy over profit. Taewon arrived exactly on time, which she'd learned meant he'd been watching from across the street for 10 minutes, assessing threats before entering. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater instead of his usual severe tailoring, almost civilian, almost normal. He sat across from her without ordering anything. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been thinking." Dimitra pushed a folder across the table. "And building." He opened it. Inside were architectural schematics, business registration documents, and a proposal titled Aegis Solutions Private Security Infrastructure for Civic Protection. "You want to start a company," Taewon said, reading. "I want to do what I came to Seoul to do. Build security systems that protect people instead of controlling them. But this time, I control who I build for." She pulled up a document on her tablet. "I've resigned from the ministry. Effective immediately." They tried to bury what happened with Director O, tried to classify the Kozlov situation to avoid embarrassment. "I'm done building for people who hide accountability." Taewon studied the proposal. "This requires capital. Significant capital. 60 billion won, distributed through legitimate business investments that can't be traced back to criminal enterprises." Dimitra met his eyes. "You said you wanted to build something different. I'm offering you a way to do it. We use the ledger to fund infrastructure that actually serves communities, security systems for schools, emergency response networks for hospitals, data protection for small businesses that can't afford corporate solutions. You want to launder my criminal empire into civic good. I want to transform it. The money exists. We can let it sit in encrypted accounts forever. Or we can use it to build something that makes the Kozlov's defeat mean something." She leaned forward. "You told me you believe in infrastructure. Prove it." Taewon was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of the folder. "The White Tiger Syndicate still exists. I still have obligations. People who depend on the organization for protection, for income. I can't just walk away." "I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to evolve." Dimitra pulled up a secondary document. "You keep the syndicate's protective operations, the legitimate businesses, the community structures that actually serve people. But you phase out everything that requires violence to maintain. Redirect the revenue streams into legal enterprises. It'll take years, maybe a decade, but it's possible. And if the other organizations see this as weakness, if they try to fill the vacuum I leave behind, then we build systems that make violence obsolete." She showed him designs she'd been working on for 3 weeks. Community alert networks, neighborhood security cooperatives, digital infrastructure that gives people the tools to protect themselves instead of depending on criminal organizations for safety. Taewon looked at her, and she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not calculation, possibility. "You're asking me to dismantle everything my father built. I'm asking you to build something better than what your father imagined." Dimitra closed the folder. "He built an empire on fear. You can build one on infrastructure, on systems that last longer than violence ever does." A phone buzzed. Taewon's. He glanced at it, and his expression tightened. Ji-hoon just surfaced. "Busan. He's trying to sell syndicate information to the Yamaguchi Gumi. Are you going to stop him?" "I'm going to let him make his sale. And then I'm going to make sure the Yamaguchi family understands that the information they're buying is 3 weeks out of date and strategically useless." Taewon stood. Ji-hoon spent his entire life believing that betrayal is smart strategy. I'm going to let him learn what happens when smart strategy meets better architecture. He picked up the folder. "I'll review your proposal, but I need something from you first." "What?" "The truth. Why are you really doing this? You could have taken your share of the ledger and disappeared, built your company anywhere in the world. Why stay in Seoul? Why partner with someone whose entire life has been soaked in the violence you claim to reject?" Dimitra stood, meeting him at eye level. "Because I watched you choose to protect people instead of profit. When Katya offered you a way out, give her the ledger, walk away clean, you chose to fight, not because you wanted the money, Because you understood that giving her access would fund operations that hurt people you'd never meet. She moved closer, close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw from the fight with Ji-hoon. You're not your father's son. You're something he never imagined. Someone who understands that real power isn't taking what you want, it's building systems that make taking unnecessary. She held his gaze. So yes, I'm partnering with you. Because the man who had blood on his knuckles at that gala, he's not the same man standing in front of me now. Taewon studied her face, and for the first time since she'd known him, his control slipped, just for a moment, just enough for her to see the person beneath the armor. My father used to say that infrastructure is just another word for control. My father used to say infrastructure is another word for care. Dimitra's voice softened. The question is which definition you want to prove true. Taewon's hand moved, not quickly, not with the calculated precision she'd come to recognize, slowly, uncertainly. He touched her face, his palm warm against her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I don't know how to build the way you do, he said quietly. I only know how to protect and destroy. Then I'll teach you how to build, and you'll teach me how to protect what we create. She covered his hand with hers. That's what partnership means. For 3 heartbeats, they stood in the quiet cafe, autumn light, filtering through paper screens, the smell of jasmine between them, the weight of 60 billion won, and 2 broken empires, and 1 impossible choice, hanging in the air. Then Taewon's phone buzzed again. He stepped back, and the moment closed like a door. I need to handle Ji-hoon, he said, his voice returning to its usual controlled register. But I'll review your proposal tonight. If we do this, if we build this company, we do it correctly. Full transparency. Legal structure. No shortcuts. Agreed. He moved toward the exit, then paused. Dimitra. Yes? Thank you. For seeing something in me I stopped looking for. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the cafe with her schematics and her tablet and the knowledge that everything was about to change. She sat back down and pulled up a new document. Partnership Agreement Aegis Solutions. She began to type. The message came at 2:34 a.m., 6 days after the cafe meeting. Dimitra was still awake in her new apartment, a secure building Yuna had selected, 20 floors up with sightlines in every direction. She'd been reviewing contracts for Aegis Solutions when her laptop chimed with an encrypted message. From encrypted user 7739. Ji-hoon didn't go to Busan to sell information. He went there to buy something. Check the Port Authority customs records for container YGTX 4477, then call me. No signature. But the encryption signature was Taewon's. Dimitra pulled up the Port Authority database using credentials Yuna had quietly provided access she probably shouldn't have but desperately needed. She searched for the container number, YGTX 4477. Arrived from Vladivostok 4 days ago. Declared contents. Industrial machinery parts. Consignee. A shell company registered in Busan that didn't exist 3 months ago. She ran the shell company through business registries, tracing backward through layers of incorporation documents, until she found the name buried 6 levels deep. Park Sung-min, the ministry analyst who'd been feeding the Kozlovs information through the Aegis grid. The man who should have been arrested weeks ago but had somehow disappeared before authorities could detain him. Dimitra's blood went cold. She called Taewon. He answered on the first ring. You found it. Park Sung-min is working with Ji-hoon. What's in the container? That's what I need you to tell me. The customs inspection was flagged as routine, but someone paid to have it expedited through processing without a full scan. It cleared quarantine yesterday and was delivered to a warehouse in Nampodong. She heard street noise through his phone, the sound of rain. I'm outside that warehouse now. The building has digital locks tied to Busan's municipal infrastructure. You want me to open it remotely? I want you to open it and access whatever security cameras are inside. I need to know what Ji-hoon bought before I walk in. Dimitra was already pulling up Busan's civic infrastructure network, less sophisticated than Seoul's Aegis grid, but still connected. Still vulnerable to someone who understood the architecture. She found the warehouse in the system, identified the lock mechanism, and sent the override command. Doors open, she said, accessing internal cameras now. The feed loaded. 4 cameras, different angles, all showing the same thing. The container, opened. And inside, packed in foam and plastic, were rows of identical devices. Dimitra zoomed in on the nearest one, enhancing the image until she could read the manufacturer's label. Her hands stopped moving. Taewon, she said slowly. Those are biometric scanners. Military-grade facial recognition systems with deep learning processors. The kind that can run real-time authentication against encrypted protocols. How many? She counted. 40 units. Maybe more in the back. Enough to brute force your voluntary authentication system through parallel processing. Taewon's voice went flat. Ji-hoon's not trying to sell information anymore. He's building his own operation. If he can crack your protocol and access the ledger independently, he becomes what you are. A syndicate leader with infinite resources. Dimitra pulled up the specifications for the scanners. But these systems need calibration data. They'd need my actual biometric profile to test against, not just the deep fake the Kozlovs built. Which means he has a source inside the ministry who still has access to the original scans Director O stole. Dimitra ran a search through the ministry's personnel database, cross-referencing anyone who had accessed biometric archives in the past month. 3 names appeared. 2 were senior security officials with legitimate reasons for access. The third was a junior data analyst named Lee Minji, who had accessed Dimitra's file 17 times in the past 2 weeks. Lee Minji, Dimitra said. She worked in Director O's department. I barely knew her. She knew you well enough to sell your biometric data to Ji-hoon. Taewon was moving now. She could hear his footsteps. I'm going inside. Keep the camera feed active. If anything happens. The warehouse lights cut out. The camera feeds went to infrared, painting everything in shades of green and black. Dimitra watched Taewon enter the frame, moving along the wall, weapon drawn. Someone else is here, he said quietly. The scanners are gone. The containers empty except for packing material. They were moved within the last 6 hours. The cameras show them being loaded into a truck at 9:47 p.m. Track the truck. Dimitra pulled up traffic cameras, following the vehicle backward through Busan's streets until she found its destination. A commercial building in Haeundae, registered as an IT consulting firm. I'm sending you the address, she said. But Taewon, that building has 12 floors and multiple tenants. They could have moved the scanners anywhere inside. Then I need you here. In Busan, tonight. His voice was urgent but controlled. I can handle the physical security, but I need someone who can identify the scanning operation when we find it. Someone who understands the technical setup well enough to disable it permanently. Dimitra looked at her laptop, at the half-finished contracts for Aegis Solutions, at the partnership agreement she'd been drafting. Yuna can have you here in 90 minutes, Taewon said. But I need an answer now. Because if Ji-hoon gets those scanners operational, if he cracks your protocol, everything we've built becomes worthless. He'll have access to the ledger, and he'll use it to fund exactly the kind of organization we're trying to dismantle. Dimitra thought about her father, about the way he'd taught her that some fights you couldn't walk away from, not because you wanted to fight, but because walking away meant abandoning everyone who couldn't. I'll be there in 90 minutes, she said. Send me everything you have on the building's layout. Already sent. And Dimitra, yes? Ji-hoon knows you're the only person who can stop him, which means he's expecting you. This is a trap. I know. She was already packing her laptop, already moving toward the door. But it's a trap that only works if we're afraid to spring it. She hung up and called Yuna. I need transport to Busan. Immediately. The helicopter's fueled and waiting on the roof, Yuna said without hesitation. I had a feeling you'd call. Dimitra took the elevator to the roof, where a sleek black helicopter sat with rotors already spinning. She climbed in, and they lifted into Seoul's night sky, the city spreading below her like a circuit board of light and shadow. Somewhere in Busan, Ji-hoon was preparing to crack open the ledger that had already destroyed one criminal empire. Somewhere in that same city, Taewon was walking into a trap designed specifically to separate him from the one person who could protect what they'd built. And Dimitra was flying toward both of them, armed with nothing but her laptop and the certainty that some systems were worth defending, even when the cost was everything. The helicopter banked south, and Seoul disappeared behind them. She opened her laptop and began to code. The IT consulting firm was a lie wrapped in glass and steel. Dimitra and Taewon entered through the service entrance at 4:17 a.m., using a keycard Yuna had acquired through methods Dimitra didn't ask about. The building was silent, emptied of its daytime workers, just emergency lighting and the hum of server rooms. 9th floor, Dimitra whispered, reading thermal signatures on her laptop. Concentrated heat signature. Multiple high-powered processors, running simultaneously. They took the stairs. Taewon moved with absolute silence, and Dimitra matched his pace, years of her father's training surfacing like muscle memory. At the 9th floor, Taewon held up a hand, stopped, listened. Voices, Korean. Two people arguing. Taewon eased the door open. The corridor was empty, but light spilled from an open office at the end. They moved toward it, backs against the wall, and Demetra's heart hammered so loud she was certain it would give them away. The voices became clear. Told you the authentication would fail. A woman's voice. Lee Min-ji. Her voluntary protocol is more sophisticated than anything we can brute force with this equipment. Then we don't brute force it. Ji-hoon's voice, cold and certain. We make her volunteer. Demetra and Taewon reached the doorway. Inside, the 40 biometric scanners were arranged in a circle, all pointed toward a single chair in the center. Lee Min-ji stood near a control terminal, hands shaking. Ji-hoon stood beside the chair, utterly calm. And in the chair, bound and gagged, was Soo-jin. Demetra's breath stopped. I knew you'd come, Ji-hoon said without turning around. The great architect, unable to resist protecting her people. It's your weakness, Demetra. You build systems to protect others, but you never protect yourself. Taewon's weapon was already drawn. Release her. Or what? You'll shoot me in a building surrounded by your own men? Ji-hoon turned, smiling. I counted 6 syndicate operatives on the ground floor. They're waiting for your signal. But the moment you give it, I trigger the fire suppression system. Halon gas. This entire floor becomes an oxygen-depleted tomb in 45 seconds. Everyone dies, including your engineer. You're bluffing, Demetra said, stepping into the room. Halon systems require manual activation from building security. You don't have that access. Ji-hoon pulled out a tablet, showing her an override screen. Lee Min-ji used to work in facilities management before Director Oh recruited her. She knows exactly how to compromise these systems. He looked at Demetra with something like pity. You built the Aegis grid to be incorruptible, but every system is only as secure as its weakest human element. Lee Min-ji's hands were shaking harder now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He said he'd pay off my mother's medical debt, he said. I don't care why, Demetra interrupted, her voice colder than she'd ever heard it. She looked at Ji-hoon. What do you want? Voluntary authentication. You, sitting in that chair, unlocking the ledger while 40 scanners record every microsecond of your biometric data under cooperative conditions. Ji-hoon gestured to Soo-jin. Do it, and I release your engineer unharmed. Refuse, and she suffocates while you watch. Taewon moved slightly, positioning himself between Demetra and Ji-hoon. She's not doing it. Then her friend dies. Demetra looked at Soo-jin, at the fear in her eyes, at the trembling in her shoulders. She thought about every choice that had led to this moment. The kiss at the gala, the authentication, the logic bomb, the broadcast that had destroyed the Kozlovs. Every decision made to protect infrastructure over people. I'll do it, Demetra said. No. Taewon's voice was absolute. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Demetra met his eyes. You taught me that sometimes protection means sacrifice. This is my choice. She moved toward the chair. Ji-hoon smiled. Smart. Just like I always knew you. Demetra's laptop chimed. The sound froze everyone. She looked at the screen. A single alert. Her voluntary authentication protocol had just been triggered. Not here. Not in Busan. In Seoul. At Aegis Tower. By someone using Taewon's fingerprint and her facial geometry. That's impossible, she whispered. No, Taewon said, understanding dawning in his voice. It's Yuna. Demetra pulled up the authentication log. Yuna had accessed the ledger using stored biometric data, the recordings from when Demetra and Taewon had originally authenticated together at the safe house. She'd bypassed the voluntary protocol by using data captured during a genuinely cooperative session, and she'd transferred every single one to a distributed network of microwallets, each one programmed to automatically donate to verified charitable organizations across 12 countries. 60 billion won, fragmenting into 60,000 charitable contributions in real time. The ledger was emptying itself. Ji-hoon's tablet lit up with alerts. He stared at it, watching his prize evaporate. No, stop her, shut it down. I can't, Lee Min-ji said, her voice breaking. The transfers are distributed. There's no central point to hack. They're already processing. Then force Demetra to reverse them. I can't reverse what I didn't authorize, Demetra said quietly. And neither can you. The money's gone, Ji-hoon. You lost. Ji-hoon's finger moved toward the Halon trigger. Taewon fired. The shot took Ji-hoon in the shoulder, spinning him back against the wall. The tablet clattered to the floor, the Halon trigger unactivated. Lee Min-ji screamed and ran. Taewon moved to Soo-jin, cutting her restraints while Demetra watched Ji-hoon slide down the wall, clutching his shoulder, staring at nothing. It was mine, Ji-hoon whispered. I earned it. I mapped everything. I sold everything. It was supposed to be mine. You didn't earn anything, Dimitra said. You just destroyed what better people built and called it strategy. Police sirens echoed in the distance. Yuna had called them the moment the transfer completed. Taewon helped Sujin to her feet. She was shaking but unharmed. Get her out, he told Dimitra. I'll handle Ji-hoon. Dimitra guided Sujin toward the exit, but at the door, she turned back. Taewon was standing over Ji-hoon, weapon lowered, expression unreadable. What happens now? She asked. Taewon looked at her, and something in his eyes had changed. Softened. Now we build something worth protecting. 6 months later, Aegis Solutions operated from a renovated building in Itaewon, its walls covered in architectural schematics and security protocols. Dimitra stood in the main office, reviewing a contract with a children's hospital that needed updated security infrastructure. Taewon entered carrying coffee, which he'd learned to make exactly the way she preferred. The syndicate's last territorial holding was transferred this morning, he said, converted to a community center, youth programs, job training, everything legitimate. And Ji-hoon? Sentenced to 18 years, cooperating with authorities to reduce other criminal networks in exchange for better conditions. Taewon set the coffee on her desk. He'll never touch another ledger again. Dimitra picked up the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. That small contact still sent electricity through her, even after months of partnership, months of late nights building systems together, months of learning to trust what they were creating. Yuna called, she said. 3 more organizations want to hire us. Schools in Gwangju, a women's shelter in Daegu, a refugee assistance program in Incheon. Can we handle the capacity? If we hire the right people? If we build carefully? She looked at him. If we keep choosing protection over profit? Taewon moved closer, and this time he didn't hesitate. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone, and she leaned into the touch. I spent my whole life believing power came from control, he said quietly. You taught me it comes from building systems that outlast us. And you taught me that protection isn't weakness. She covered his hand with hers. It's the strongest thing we can choose. He kissed her then, soft and certain, and she tasted possibility. Not perfection, not redemption. Just 2 people who'd walked through fire and decided to build something fireproof together. When they pulled apart, her laptop was chiming with new contract requests. They had work to do. They got back to building. True power isn't found in what you can take, it's built in what you choose to protect. They thought a kiss would make her a key. Instead, it forged her into an architect of empires. This is ruthless romance tales, where love isn't gentle, it's strategic, hard-won, and built to last. Subscribe for more stories where hearts and empires are won by those brave enough to build both.